Chapter 1. A Portly Kid from Queens. I was born in Queens, New York in 1954. I am the oldest of 6 kids, 3 boys and 3 girls. 3 of us are the biological children of my parents, and 3 were adopted through foster care. I am one of the biological kids, along with a sister who's 6 years younger and a baby brother who is 17 years younger than me. Although I was a premature baby weighing in at 4 pounds 10 ounces, at a certain point very early in my life, I just started eating and never stopped. I suppose my family heritage added to my genetic lot in life. Both of my parents came from families who loved to eat. My mom, Isabel, also known as Izzy, was half Jamaican, and my dad was from the Bahamas. Dad looked like a young Sidney Poitier, who happened to be from Exuma, the same island in the Bahamas where my father's family was from. When my dad was younger, people often did a double take when they saw him driving his white Plymouth Valiant station wagon, the same car Sidney Poitier drove in Lilies of the Field. My parents met at John Adams High School in Queens. My mother was one of the first African-American cheerleaders at the school, at the time, a very big deal. She must have loved being a cheerleader, because I grew up hearing a constant chant of rickety-rackety shanty town, who can knock John Adams down? Nobody, nobody, absolutely nobody. Yeah, team! Honestly, I can't believe I still remember her saying that, but I do. My dad was an affable guy and a really sharp dresser. He was a very good storyteller who enjoyed sharing tales from his younger days. Turns out my dad was a stone-cold thug. He had friends with names like Deadeye and Jelly Roll. He had a walking stick that had a knife in it. Yeah, growing up, he was a tough guy, but by the time his children came along, he was a short teddy bear. I like to say I come from folks built low to the ground with one leg shorter than the other, the better to lean into the wind and survive hurricanes. Of my parents, Dad was definitely the gentler one. If you fell and skinned a knee, you went right to Dad. He'd comfort you and give you a big bear hug, whereas Mom was more likely to tell us to stop crying. Her approach was the early version of man up. You might say Izzy was the original Tiger Mom. She was tough as nails, and unlike a lot of women of her generation, she enjoyed confrontation. To her, it was sport. I knew I was loved by her, but she knew exactly how to needle me and what drove me crazy. Whenever she'd come to my house for dinner, just as I was serving the meal, she'd ask, "Is this any good?" "No, I just spent an hour making you something that tastes like crap," I'd respond. Mom loved to banter and was a real joker. She was also honest to a fault and didn't believe in coddling. She taught my younger daughter, Leela, to play checkers as a kid. Most grandparents let the kids win, but not my mom. No way. To her, losing is how you learn. And now I call Leela Little Izzy, because she's so much like my mom. I once overheard her playing Monopoly with some of her friends. She wiped the board. Then one of her friends asked, "Where'd you learn to play Monopoly?" "My Nana," Leela said with great pride. I couldn't help but smile. I was what you might call a late bloomer. As hard as this might be to believe today, I didn't talk until I was 3.5 years old. Of course, as a family friend pointed out later, I could never get a word in edgewise anyway. My mom did all the talking for me. She was like my PR agent. Although I was born premature, I think my lack of development was a combination of being extremely shy, something I never really outgrew, and what today might be labeled as a learning disorder. The only thing I had no problems learning was eating. Well, maybe I had one issue I didn't learn, and that was when to stop. Although my siblings and I have the same father, he was really 2 different guys over the years. My dad drove a bus and was a blue-collar worker. He hustled every day to provide for his family. When I was a young boy, he and a couple of buddies from New York City Transit, as it was then known, opened up a luncheonette in the depot. They made and sold sandwiches in addition to working their regular shifts. My dad was the kind of man who did whatever it took to make sure his family had everything we needed. In a Caribbean family, if you only had 2 jobs, you were obviously slacking off. But the drivers all had their rackets going to supplement their incomes. For example, there was always someone selling hot merchandise. You know, things they claimed fell off the back of a truck somewhere. In fact,